Oh man, it's day number 2 out of 3 on our video series on how to actually program, set up for, and manage a lights out system. We're dropping some serious knowledge that can take your company and your career to the highest level. We're on the Matsuura MAM72-35V. It's a 5-axis machine with 40 pallets. So in the first video, we actually showed Dre discussing how to strategically program and set up a job for lights out machining. You don't program it like another job, like on a 3-axis or something else. Not only is this a 5-axis, but you have to think about the tooling you're using, the longevity of use, meaning we don't want string chips, we don't want anything wearing down. We want to make sure we have multiple tools that might wear down so we can actually call up a new one and then run it as the original one. And we want to make this thing foolproof. A lot of people have these machines, but they're sitting and they're not running parts. So we want to equip you with the knowledge so when you program it and you set it up, this machine runs nonstop 24/7. You simply manage it, tell it what parts you want to run overnight and throughout the days, and then you pull the parts out as needed, just like a vending machine in your own shop. All right, so today is video number 2. This is going to feature Barry, and Barry is a master when it comes to lights out machining. He has a huge amount of experience, and in this video, he's going to actually program a cool part. Now, when you looked at Dre's part, he had a lot of different things going on, and there were a lot of challenges. When you look at Barry's part, Barry's is kind of tall and slender. So when you come across it, you can have chatter, you can have movement. So he's going to talk about how to strategically program it so you can make a perfect part in a single operation and then simply pull it out of the machine complete. So that's what's happening in today's video. We're just dropping crazy knowledge. In the third video, we're going to show you how to program the entire system and show you exactly how to make it run nonstop 24/7 so you're making true money in your own companies, in your own shop right here in the United States of America or in whatever country you come from. So without further ado, let's go to Barry where he's programming the left side differential carrier. Boom.
What's up everybody? So today we're helping our friends over at Rush Auto Works streamline their process, bring some parts back in-house, and start utilizing lights out machining. Now in our previous episode, Dre walked you guys through the process that he used on the rack body. And today I'm gonna get started on the rear differential carrier. Now our goal here is that when a customer gets online and orders one of these parts, all Rush Auto Works has to do is schedule the part on their machine and make parts just in time. Now today, a lot of what I want to talk about is the reliability layer that you have to build into your programs and machining processes to make sure that you're successful running lights out. So let's take a look at a few of the methods that we used here to ensure that we make quality parts, have a stable process, and require almost zero operator interference during our processing. The first thing that we need to look at for a successful lights out machining operation is the way that we process our part. Now in a lot of our videos, you'll see us doing crazy full slotting and just ripping chips off gigantic chunks of steel. Well, typically that's not the types of machining operations that you're gonna see running overnight. What we wanna make sure is that we have safe programming using proven feeds and speeds with proven tools that we know are gonna last the entire night through or the entire weekend. Now taking a look at this part on my screen, it's a super simple part. You can do this part in a 3-axis mill in 2 or 3 operations. However, our goal here is to get as many parts as we can when there's not people in the shop to watch the part or to flip the part to the second operation. So the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna drill the hole in the top of our part for our hydraulic tailstock to go into. Now, if you take a look at how we're holding this part, you'll see that we only have about 100 thou worth of material in our jaws. Our stock is 8 inches tall, so I would never ever process this part this way without having that hydraulic tailstock. But since we do, this is how we're doing it. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna face both sides of our stock. I was actually pretty shocked that a 3-inch face mill was able to face this really well without a lot of chatter and vibration. Again, this is all thanks to our hydraulic tailstock. The next thing I'm gonna do is drill all of our holes and pre-drill our pockets. Right after that, we're gonna come in and we're gonna rough out all of our pockets and then do our finish passes. Now my next tool path is just gonna go around the outside profile of my part about 1/8 of an inch deep. Now the only reason I'm doing this is because I wanna be able to chamfer the outside profile of our part before our tailstock gets pulled out. Now that that's done, we're gonna flip our part over and we're gonna finish out the counter bore on this big pocket in the middle. Now this is the point of our program. We're going to start using in-process probing to check some of our features. After everything's deburred with our tailstock still engaged, I'm going to come in and remove as much of the excess material as I can without pulling that tailstock out. As soon as the tailstock's removed, we're gonna go ahead and cut this notch on the side of our part. Now this could easily be done with like a keyway cutter, but in this case, we're just gonna use a 1/2" end mill. All right, after our slot's complete, we're gonna come in with our small lollipop end mill and add the fillet around the outside of this slot feature. It's time to remove our center drilled hole from the top of our part, and then we're gonna start cutting away the material in between our tabs. Finally, we're ready to cut our tabs down to thickness, and this part will be complete. Now, one thing I wanted to talk about that I thought was kind of funny is me and Dre didn't communicate very much while we were programming our two different parts. We both started with tabs that were 20 thousandths thick. Now, when my part was done and the trunnion kicked back to 0 degrees, my tabs were so thin that my part just fell down. So I ended up at a 50 thou thick tab, and that's also exactly how Dre did his. He started at 20 thousandths and ended at 50. Now that our final operation is complete, all that's left to do is break the part off from the excess stock, buzz off those little tabs that are left on there, and this part is ready to go to anodize. The second most important thing to having a successful lights out operation is tool breakage detection and tool life management. Now, if you take a look at this tool changer here, you'll see that we have a ton of real estate, 530 tools. And between the programs that me and Dre have written, we're only using about 20 of those. So what do we do with all this empty space? To answer that question, take a look at what the machine's doing right now. So every time that we use a tool, when it's done cutting and before it goes back into the tool changer, we're measuring it with our laser. What it's doing right now is just making sure that the tool hasn't either grown or shrunk by 20 thousandths or more. You can adjust this tolerance in the machine to whatever you want it to be, but if a tool's broken or if it's pulled out of a holder, you're gonna know and the machine's gonna stop. The second important thing is tool life, and that's where all the extra real estate in our tool changer is gonna come in handy. If we take a look at our tool management and we pick a tool, say tool 2, you can see here that we have a tool life field. If we take a look at tool life type, you can see that we have several options here, and what we've chosen is time in hours to be the variable that we're concerned with. We could also choose time in seconds, minutes, or the number of times the tool's been called. In this case, we're saying that we're gonna use this tool for 12 hours. We're gonna be notified that it's about to die at the 10-hour mark. And at that point, we can decide whether we wanna change it now or allow it to expire. Now, when a tool expires, there's two different ways the machine can react. One, you can have it alarm out and wait for operator intervention, or two, you can set up a bunch of sister tools. Now, if we have sister tools set up, what's gonna happen is the tool is gonna expire, and then the machine is gonna go grab one of those sister tools, and it's gonna use it instead of the expired tool. We can also do that with our tool breakage detection. Now, if you have multiple programmers working on programs for the same piece of equipment, you want those programmers to work from the same tool library. That way, the only things you have to add to your magazine are tools that are non-standard or special tools like drills and thread mills. When you're running a machine equipped with 40 pallets, mistakes can multiply fast. For example, if we didn't build any tool life into this program, then we could maybe run our first part, a tool could break on the first feature. Every single other tool is gonna come in and try to machine the part when the majority of the stock is still there. So what's gonna happen is you're gonna come in the next day, you're gonna find every single tool in your magazine broken and every single part in your pallet pool scrapped. We don't want that, and that's why reliability is important. Coming in the morning and finding all your tools broken, that was the voice of experience talking. The third thing that's gonna make or break your lights out machining process is in-process probing. In-process probing is absolutely critical to lights out machining because it finds your work offsets for you, and it also measures critical features. What you don't want to do is have 40 parts run overnight and not a single feature got measured by anybody. So you can see what's happening here as the pallet comes into the machine. The first thing I do is drive the B and C axes to 0. We enter into protected positioning mode just in case the wrong part gets called into the machine. And then we probe our Z. And once we have that, we probe our angle of our C-axis and then override our work offsets with the probe values. Now, apart from updating work offsets, the other kind of probing that we're using in process here is measuring. So if you watch what's happening now, we just machined the center bore of our part and withdrew our tailstock. For this feature, we're using a 4-point bore probing cycle. And I felt like the 4 points was really important because you really don't know how much pressure that hydraulic tailstock is putting into your part. All right, if you take a look at our bore measurement cycle here, you can see on this G65 line, we have an H value. And what that H is telling the machine is that if our feature is within plus or minus 0.2 of a thousand, then our feature is good. Now we can write in all other kinds of macro logic here to do different things. For example, with this cycle, there's a few different measurement ranges that take place. We have a null band, where if it measures, say, within plus or minus 1/10 of our nominal feature size, it's not gonna make any adjustment, it's just gonna continue on. The second range is where an adjustment to the work offset is made. Now, let's say that we were telling it could be plus or minus 0.2, but we actually end up being 0.2 big. Well, we don't want it to offset our tool by the full 0.2 because we might end up getting something that's out of tolerance. But what we do want it to do is update our tool offset by 70% of the error. And the third range is where we just tell the machine to alarm out and stop processing. Now, some of the things that I really like about the Matsuura's pallet pool is for each pallet, we're able to assign a project. So if we take a look at what Dre was running over here, we can click on one of his pallets and we see a picture of the part. In addition to that, we can take a look at work instructions and you can upload JPEGs, PDFs, whatever you want. And we can see here that this is how Dre's part mounts into the vise. So if there's any question about that from, say, a new guy or a guy who's not familiar with this machining process, they'll know exactly how to mount the part in there and how the part is set up work offset wise. If we take a look at one of my pallets, you'll see that it has a picture of my part. And same thing, we have work instructions, and this is how my part sits in the vise. And that's important because if you look at things like the way the part's being held in the vise, if I just walked up to the machine and didn't know any better, I would probably sink that stock all the way into the jaws, and then I'd end up having my face mill collide with my jaws, and that would not be good. Although it would make you guys another crash video to laugh at. In addition, we put some general notes in here that say, for example, X and Y must be center of rotation. And the reason that we're doing that is because we're using our hydraulic tailstock. The program will automatically probe Z0 and align the part. The program uses G54 for all pallets, and each tool will be checked for breakage at tool change. So this takes out a lot of the guesswork that you would normally have on a part that maybe somebody else programmed. So there you have it. This was a super simple part that pretty much anybody could have programmed. But when you're looking at doing things lights out, there's a lot of things that you have to consider that you may not have thought about. If you're interested in taking your business into the world of lights out machining, reach out to Keith at titansofcnc.com and check out our website for cool machines just like this Matsuura MAM72. Machines are in stock, by the way.
Oh man, episode 2 is complete. We are all set up, locked and loaded. Tune in next week because next week, Barry's gonna go through the entire process. He's gonna show you how to program this machine. He's gonna show you how to truly put it into lights out machining mode. Whether you just love machining or you're a machinist or a shop owner, the knowledge in next week's video is gonna take you to a whole new level, so tune in. Boom.